getting less than $1,400 per free and reduced lunch count. And it's enough money to get them up to $1,400. So it's basically saying we're going to put a floor on the amount of money you get per free and reduced lunch student, up to $1,400, but only for the largest 20 districts in the state. That pretty much came out of the House bill. It's a slight tweak on what they did. And it's only one time, and it's in fiscal 13. Then we have the endowment change, and here you see the full effect of the endowment change, where charter schools are getting the money for the full year. So the cities in the first class lose about $7. Charter schools gain about $25 per kid. Then we have the small schools provision, which I'll go into in more detail, but essentially that provides more money for school districts that have fewer than 1,000 pupils on a sliding scale. The smaller you are, the more money you get. So for rural schools, under 1,000 on the average, they're getting $186 more. So the biggest winners in the bill are the small schools, and that's because of that change.
That's ongoing.
That's ongoing. Then we have the literacy aid, which interestingly is pretty even among the different regions of the state at least. And the charter school lease aid, we did eliminate grandfather aid for those charter schools that were getting more than $1,200 per pupil. That was cut beginning in 13, so you see a reduction in the charter schools there. Then the other changes, again, are primarily the impact of compensatory and other things that are linked to the general ed formula. So quite typically what you're seeing here is $230 per pupil on the average, with the largest increase being in the non-metro small districts, which benefit from the small schools, and the smallest increases being in the non-metro larger districts that don't benefit from the small schools, and they're also not big enough to get the extra compensatory. That's kind of where that fits. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the details of what's in the bill. A lot of this is probably pretty familiar to you already, but there may be some new stuff. So, $50 on the formula, $51.74 for fiscal 12, another $50 to $52.24 in fiscal 13. All of the linkages remain intact, including compensatory, sparsity, transportation, sparsity, non-public transportation, tribal contract. The small schools formula, ongoing, beginning in fiscal 13. It's funded as part of general ed, so it's open and standing. It will not be prorated. School districts with fewer than 1,000 AMC pupil units qualify, and the formula is $522.40, which is 10% of the formula, but D-length, if it came out of the legislative bill. Times 1,000 minus the AMC pupil units divided by 1,000. Charter schools are not eligible. So this is what it looks like. The sliding scale from 522 down to 0 as you go from no ADM up to 1,000 ADM. And in terms of total revenue, it looks like this. It's a bell curve, and or parabola. It's a maximum of $130,600 for a school district that has 500 ADM or 500 adjusted ADM, and gradually goes down as you get closer to 1,000. Okay, then the compensatory pilot project formula. I think it's a misnomer. I think this has nothing to do with the pilot project. Just a way to get more money to certain school districts. But the 20 largest districts in the state are eligible for this money if their regular compensatory per compensatory pupil unit, which is free plus half of the reduced, is less than $1,400 per pupil unit. And interestingly, we've got that kind of special deal of compensatory pilot grants that go to certain districts. That's not counted in determining whether you're at 1,400. So if you're in Anoka and you're getting a significant bump from that, we don't take that into account. We calculate the 1,400 of this formula first, and then you get that other one on top of it. So it's not really a pure thing conceptually, but that's how it works. Money must be used for basic skills purposes. The allocation by building is determined locally, so this doesn't follow, flow to the building like the regular. So who gets the money? This is Bob Porter's latest estimate. What we've done here is rank ordered the 20 districts with the largest AMCPU in terms of what they're currently getting per compensatory pupil unit. So Lakeville is currently getting the smallest amount, $454 per free and reduced lunch student. Well, they're going to get another $946 to get them up to the $1,400 pupil level, which is $1.1 million. And as we go down the list, you can see gradually the higher your concentration of poverty, the more you're already getting, so therefore the less you get under this program. And Burnsville is kind of right at the edge in terms of qualifying. Under our calculations, they're getting $13.83 per compensatory pupil unit now, so they just get a $17 bump to get them up to $1,400. Again, this is a one-time formula in fiscal year 13. This was originally in the House bill, but only for fiscal year 12. And at the time the House did that, they were saying, we're doing it one time, but we're kind of hoping we can continue something along. We also have some school districts that are in the big 20, but they don't qualify because they're already getting more than $1,400 per pupil unit. So North St. Paul, Maplewood is another one that's right on the edge. They're getting about $1,401 right now based on our calculations. Could change depending on the data, of course. That's kind of our latest estimate. And also you see Bloomington, Osseo, Robbinsdale, St. Cloud, Duluth, Minneapolis, St. Paul are already getting more than $1,400 per pupil for compensatory, so they would qualify for this money. Endowment. And this is effective with the March 2012 payment. And the reason it's effective with the March 2012 payment is that the Department and the Governor raised some objections to this provision, and we're especially concerned about unintended consequences of making charter school districts. One of the provisions that was the most obvious to us was that in the case of the state credit enhancement program, we didn't want the charter schools to be involved in that and lower the credit rating for all the school districts. So we got language added that specifically excludes them from participating in that program. But we weren't sure about other stuff that might be floating around out there that might be an unintended consequence of making a charter school a school district. So the compromise was to delay it until March in terms of the effective date. Theoretically, that gives us 6 months to figure out if there are some other problems. And then the legislature agreed they would be receptive to making a change before March 1 if we find out there's some other unintended consequences of making. That's the reason why the charter schools are getting funded half of the first time around, is to allow some time to review that and see what else is happening that we don't want to happen. And the other piece of this is that the change is made from resident to adjusted, as I said, which benefits school districts that gain students from open enrollment and reduces the funding for school districts that lose kids to open enrollment. Sparsity revenue for school districts that close facilities. What this does is expand sparsity revenue to cover decreases caused by a school closure in a neighboring district. We had an example of that where a school closed in Kitson County, and that affected the Lancaster School District's sparsity revenue. The legislature took care of that on a one-time basis for a couple of years, and so now what's been done is that's been made part of a permanent law, and Lancaster was grandfathered in to be covered under that change on an ongoing basis. They've also made a change in the deadline. It used to be if you were a school district that was closing a building, you had to notify the department 60 days before the end of the school year to qualify for that grandfather provision, and the 60-day piece was eliminated, so you just have to notify the department by the beginning of the school year. The Northland School District in Reamer had failed to meet the deadline, so they weren't getting the money, and they were grandfathered in terms of qualifying for the revenue started this fall. Early graduation scholarships. It's a bill that Representative Garofalo has had for 2 or 3 years now, and he was in a position to get that into the bill this year. So the bottom line here is that if a student graduates early, they're going to qualify for a higher education scholarship of $2,500 if they graduate 1 semester early, $5,000 if they graduate 2 semesters early, $7,500 if they graduate 3 or more semesters early. They can use the scholarship at any accredited higher education institution, whether it's inside or outside of Minnesota. Part of the rationale or the argument was that kids that live far away from colleges, they have a hard time participating in PSEO. This gives them another option to do that. The department argued, why don't they do colleges and schools then? That didn't fly. There's also an early graduation military service award program that provides the same awards if a student goes into the military. So they graduate 1 semester early, they go into the military, they get the 25. How does that affect the school districts then? Well, right now, school districts get to count kids who graduate mid-year for the rest of the school year as part of their ADM. That's going to end beginning in fiscal year 2012. So when this is implemented, it's going to be a challenge for the department to figure all of this out. But what we will do is we will ask the districts and the students to notify the department about their early graduates and whether they plan to participate in this program. It'd be pretty crazy to say, no, I don't want the money, but we have to ask. If we find out about the participation before we calculate the final pupil units and the final aid for the school year in which they graduate, so like before November, after the school year is over, then we'll just adjust the pupil units and it'll all flow through the calculations. Pretty straightforward. If we don't find out about it right away, and there's no time limits on this, which is one of the things I'm thinking about for next year. If the kid graduates early in 2012, he works for 30 years, he decides he'd like to go back to college, and he retires. Well, we got to keep track of all that for 30 years and come back and give us $2,500 scholarship. Right? So there's a challenge in terms of keeping track of all that. So what we plan to do is, if we aren't notified of the participation by the end of the year, or by when we calculate the final payment, then we'll have to calculate something off on the side that says, for this particular district, here's what the impact is of one more pupil unit. And then when we find out later that the kid plans to participate in the program, we'll have to make a retroactive adjustment to the aid for that year and take money away when if we find out, let's say, 2 years later that he's participating. We'd go back in, we'd keep track of what the rate was in terms of aid and levy per pupil unit, and make an adjustment to your current year aid and your current levy to offset what happened during that year. But it's much more messy if we do that than if we just adjust the pupil unit. So we're hoping that we'll get notified of most of these up front, and that we'll be able to make the adjustments and not have to hold on to that data and keep running it forward.
Well, can I ask, I'm just a farm boy at heart. Why can't we keep some of this stuff simple and just ask maybe next time around to just, most of the school districts are very honest people. We have very honest people working for us. We'd be more than happy to write the checks to these kids as they qualify for this program. All they'd have to do is sign up for just fill out a scholarship program application. We'll write the check and be done with it. Why are we going through such difficult, time-consuming things for the department? Why don't you guys just trust us to do it? I mean, there would be no negative for us. Why would we say no to doing it?
Well, it might be one of the options if you want to consider it. Maybe MASBO, and you may want to look at, if this program is going forward, what sorts of changes will we make? I'm sure there'll be department proposals to clean this up next year, and that might be one of them.
Well, they're cutting you guys 5% and then asking you to do more work. It just doesn't seem to tie together in my head. Anyway, never mind.
Grace.
The district decided a cash payment graduating early. You do back on the logic that a 17-year-old student can get cash $7,500. Would those checks be written to the student to go cash, or would they be sent to the parent?
Good question. I don't know.
Do I send the kid a 1099?
There is a bunch of mechanics that have to be worked out for this. I think what happens under the bill for the higher ed piece of this is the student has to send to the department a invoice that shows their tuition payment, and then we pay based on that. If it's less than their scholarship, we have to keep track of, okay, they have a scholarship of $7,500, they just paid $5,000, they still have a balance of $2,500. So we'll have to run a spreadsheet on all the kids that participate in the program.
We do that already with PSL and PSEO kids. We're used to doing that. It's not a big deal for us. Never mind.
Yeah, that's certainly one option.
Yep.
All right, moving on. January 15th contracting deadline and penalty eliminated. T&E repeal. T&E was pretty much phased out anyway. Albert Lee was added to the list of districts receiving the compensatory pilot projects at $150,000. That's ongoing, unlike the other compensatory pilot. Uses of revenue. Valerie talked about this, and I'm sure it's something you're already familiar with. The 2% staff development set aside, suspended for 2 years. So it's just the same process we had the last 2 years.